Great job getting and setting all those properties. You don't have to set up everything you'll ever use right off the bat. Most likely, you'll be adding features as you enhance your program, and that's great! The next feature we should work on is a method for displaying the recipe. We want a single method call that will pull all the information from the recipe and give it to us in an easy-to-read format. This was the first method we added to our class. We called this method displayRecipe, and now we're ready to finish this method. This is a great opportunity to talk about another tenet of object-oriented programming, single responsibility. The single responsibility principle states that every class should have responsibility over a single part of the functionality provided by the software, and that responsibility should be entirely encapsulated or contained by the class. A class should have only one reason to change. Our recipe class is in charge of describing that recipe itself. Adding and retrieving data about a recipe are its main concerns. Displaying a recipe is one way of retrieving data, but that display could change based on where we're using that data, not what data we'll be using. This is a good place to break off into a new class. Remember, a class is a way to organize our code and group the functionality and data in a logical manner. We'll put any methods that deal with the display or rendering of data into a separate group. Let's get coding. Let's create a new class named render. To do that, we create a new file in our classes directory. We'll name this render.php. We add our opening PHP tags, then create our new class, named render. We can move our displayRecipe method over here. We don't need to store any data in this class. That's all handled by our recipe. We just want to use this method on a particular recipe. We can pass a recipe object into this method. Let's add recipe. Then we replace the keyword this with recipe. Okay, now how do we use this method in our script? Since we don't need to store any data or keep the state of this class, we don't actually need to instantiate an object. By declaring a method as static, we make it accessible outside the class without needing to make an instance of the class. To declare a method as static, we add the keyword static. You can add this before or after the visibility, but make sure you're consistent. Back in our cookbook, we need to include our new class. Let's clean up our output again. Now we're ready to call our static method. We've used static methods before with the PDO connection to a database. To use a static method, we specify the class, render, then double colons, and the method, displayRecipe. Then we'll pass in our recipe. We want this to display to screen, so let's echo. Now let's run our script. Let's open this console a little further. Now let's run that again. We see that we cannot access the private property recipe title in our render file. That's right, we made this private, and because we're no longer calling it from the same class, we'll need to specify our getter. So get title and get source. These are methods, so we add our parentheses, and let's try that again. Great! My First Recipe by Alina Halligan. Great job! Now we're ready to expand our method to display the rest of the recipe details.